So chances are you already know some of the benefits of cycle syncing and what it can really do for your life, your business, your relationships, literally every area of your life. But maybe you're now questioning and wondering, like, how do I actually track this? Like, what do I track? What do I need to be paying attention to so that I actually know where I am in my cycle so that I can actually sync up with it? And if that is you, this video is here for you. I'm going to dive into the biggest mistakes that I see women making when it comes to tracking their cycle, and how do you actually pay attention to where you are in your cycle so that when you hear phrases about like what phase you're in or when you need to be doing what, you can actually listen to your body and know where you are in your phases. Okay. My name is Renae, and I help people here on this channel learn to leverage their body, how to listen to their body, and really sync up with that and use their feminine energy inside their business, inside their life, so that they can create more income and more impact. Chances are you already know why you want to be cycle syncing and you already know some of the benefits, but let's just do a quick recap because most of us have not really been taught much about our cycles or about our bodies or why it really makes such a huge difference. In fact, most of the research hasn't really been done and is only starting to come out in the most recent years in terms of how women and men are so different and how women's hormones really are impacting us, like from the top down, like every part of us. Research is showing like how your brain functions differently. So that means the way you think, the way you focus, the way you create, communicate, all of those things is impacted by your hormones. The way you lose weight, the way you gain muscle, the way your saliva tastes, the way you smell, the way your face changes, literally everything is impacted by your hormones. And when we look at the female hormone cycle, there's not a single day in the month where your hormones are exactly the same as another day, because we have this dynamic dance of estrogen climbing and dropping, and then progesterone climbing and dropping. And both of these two hormones feel so different. So how you feel on day 7 of your cycle is going to feel vastly different than day 14 or day 21. So being able to track where you are in this cycle is going to make a world of difference when it looks at when you're trying to do your to-do list, or when you're trying to manage your kids, or when you're trying to create a new project in your business. Knowing where you are and aligning with it is going to make you the most powerful and the most effective. It's really an unkept secret or untold secret that more women need to know. So please go share this video with other women that need to know this too. Okay, now back to what do we actually track? What are we looking for? What do we need to know? And how do we do that? Right inside this video, I'm just going to narrow it down into like, let's look at tracking and what are we watching for? What are we looking for? One of the biggest mistakes that I see women making is tracking only their period. Now, it makes sense, right? Because it's this outward cue and clue as to where we are in our cycle. And for many of us, like we were taught, like this is the time of the month that's shameful and we want to hide it and we want to keep it away and we don't like it. And it's this miserable sort of thing. So for a lot of women, tracking and understanding when that period was going to come was a very valuable and very important thing. The problem with our period is just like one component of this whole cycle, this whole thing that's happening throughout the month. And actually, the period is really just what I kind of call the encore to ovulation. Ovulation is really the primary player of what's actually happening in your cycle. And if we don't have ovulation, then chances are we're not having these natural changes of estrogen, progesterone like we see on the image. We're going to have very different changes. And so we want to know, what is that actual rhythm? What are those curves of estrogen and progesterone, and how are they playing out inside of our month? And the only way that we're going to know that is if we're tracking it. We're not going to know it just by tracking our periods. We're not going to know it just by circling once a month when that period comes. We want to know the ins and the outs of what's actually happening. So if you learn anything from this video, I hope that you walk away with knowing like ovulation is your primary thing that I want you to be paying attention to. If you're ovulating late, if you're ovulating early, if you're not ovulating at all of those types of things are going to be really good indicators and clues as to what's actually happening and going on inside of our bodies. The time between your ovulation to your period doesn't usually change very much. For most women, it's between 10 to 14 days. And generally, once you know like what that is, it's going to be the same time every single time. It doesn't really vary. So for me, I'm like 12, 13 days based off like maybe I didn't track ovulation quite down to the exact day. Overall, it's like 12 days to the dot. So if you're one of those people that's like, my period is unpredictable, I don't ever know when it's going to happen, like how do I actually sync with it when it's so unpredictable, it just shows up out of nowhere and surprises me? If you are tracking ovulation, that will never happen for you. You will always have at least like a 10 to 14 day sort of reminder or heads up as to when your period's going to come. So you can make modifications, you can make adjustments with a 2-week window versus it happening to you on that day. Now, there are lots of ways to track ovulation, and some are better than others, and some are going to fit for other people's lifestyles, and everybody's going to be in a different situation. So I'm just going to throw out a bunch of them. We'll let you kind of decide where you're at and what's going to work for you. Personally, I love tracking basal body temperature. Your basal body temperature is the temperature that your body is at baseline, like at rest, like you're not burning any calories, you're not moving, you're not doing anything, there's no changes. So the best way to get this temperature is when you're in bed, first thing in the morning before you've even got up out of bed. Like legit, you can't even roll over and like scroll your phone and hang out for a little while. Like first thing you need to do is check your temperature. Now, when I was pregnant or trying to conceive, I did this with a little thermometer every single morning, trying to track when that ovulation time was occurring. Now, having my youngest be 8 years old, my oldest is 13, and no more babies are coming, I'm not that diligent, and I want something simple. I want something easy. And so I have the Aura Ring. The Aura Ring will do it automatically for me. I just wear it overnight, and it's tracking that temperature. Now, there's a lot of nuances to this, right? Like, just like I said, we want that baseline basal temperature. So if you go to bed late or you're not getting into a full, good, deep sleep, that can vary that temperature a little bit. If you get up early or any of those variations, like your temperature can change. So the best way to get, like if we were looking at like true basal body temperature, we would want the same kind of predictable cycle or in terms of sleep and rhythms and going to bed and all that type of stuff. For most of us, we're probably not going to have that exact predictability all of the time. And there's going to be some variances. So it can take a little bit of learning and time to figure out like what is actually happening with that basal body temperature. What does that look like? Where is it ovulating? When you ovulate, you'll see a direct change in your temperature. So in the front half of the month, your temperatures will generally be a little bit lower. If you're tracking it on a basal body chart, or in the Aura Ring or things like that, it'll be on the lower side. And then once you've ovulated, your temperature will spike. And so that spike will happen when that ovulation has happened, and then when progesterone stays high throughout the remainder of the month. If you are getting pregnant or trying to become pregnant, you'll see that that progesterone still stays high, or that temperature still stays high even beyond. But if you are not and your period comes, you'll see that temperature drop back down and start low again. So we see this very drastic shift in the month where our temperatures are low, our temperatures are high, and ovulation being the indicator in between there. Now, there are other indicators, right? Like basal body temperature is not the only one for us to pay attention to in terms of like whether or not we've ovulated or not. Your cervix will change. So it changes in texture, and the hole inside of it will change and open up based right around there around ovulation as well. The cervical height, so where your cervix sits inside of your vagina, will change. It will elevate and it'll descend. And so you'll feel that difference there. So if you're one of those people that's not very squeamish and you want to get really intimate with your body, which honestly, I think it's really valuable for all of us to do at some point in our lives, having clean hands, you know, stick your fingers up there and explore a little bit and like pay attention to what's actually happening and what it feels like and what's going on with our bodies. I think it's a really empowering thing for us to know the ins and the outs of our bodies. Like, why is it shameful for us to actually feel and know all of those things? But that's a whole nother side note. Now, another change that can happen is that our cervical fluid changes. So that mushy gushy stuff that comes out of our vaginas every single day throughout the month, most of the time, has different texture, right? There's times when you're going to notice it's like white, thick, cottage cheesy, like sticky. There's other times where it's creamy. There's other times where it's sticky. There's so much change that happens in our cervical fluid that can be very indicative of what's actually happening inside of our bodies, whether it's a normal process that's actually happening or whether it's something that's gone wrong and can be a really great indicator for us. So that's another just sign and thing for us to track and pay attention to is like, what does my cervical mucus really look like? You'll notice as you move closer to ovulation, that cervical mucus gets almost like egg whites. It's very sticky and very stretchy and very long. Like you could stick it between your fingers and it would like stick with like egg whites. That is prime ovulation territory sort of cervical mucus. So cervical mucus is also another place to track. Now, like I said, ovulation and your period are my two recommended places to start tracking. Once you have those two things in place, then we can start filling in the gaps of what is actually happening and what are the nuances for you in terms of all of those other cycles. There's a lot of information out there, and I even teach a lot of information about like the different phases, what's best to do in each phase, where to do things, all of that type of thing. But at the very core of it, I want you to be able to track and listen to your body because all of us are going to have slightly nuanced things inside of our bodies, and our bodies are all going to be a little bit different. So paying attention to all of those things like physical sensations. What do you notice about your body on different phases of the cycle? Do you notice like sore breasts? Do you notice more energy? Do you notice like more pain? Do you notice more fatigue? Like what is happening for you throughout the month? Do you notice emotional changes? Maybe there's days when you feel like so moody and so irritable. Like when I first started learning about cycle syncing, there were days that I would get so angry about the kids leaving shoes on the floor. And I'm like, why is this bothering me so bad today when it didn't bother me like 2 weeks ago? Like their behavior hasn't changed, but how I'm responding to it is drastically different. That was a huge indicator for me as to where I was in that cycle. So just start paying attention to those days when you feel like, I feel so good. I feel elated. I feel wonderful on those days that we don't feel that. We feel very distracted. We feel frustrated. We're irritable, all of those types of things. Looking at how our mental capacity thinks. How focused do you feel? How attentive do you feel? Do you feel like showing up on video like this and recording a training? Or do you feel like showing up on social media? Or those days when you just want to be in like hiding under your hoodie and behind the computer and not talking to anybody? Start tracking those and start plugging them in. While we may be thinking that they're just random, there's a great chance and great possibility that they are falling in line with where you are in your cycle. So my recommendation is that you track all of it and start becoming aware of it. What I've noticed is I've had clients where like on the third day of every month, they have a certain craving or they're feeling a certain way. And when we know those things, then either A, we can adapt to it, we can adjust to it, or B, it can help us kind of become better, curious, question asking people of like, why is this happening? Like, what is going on for me right here? How can I shift? How can I lean into it? How can I support my body? How can I really learn to listen to my body? When it comes to tracking, there is so much that we could be tracking, right? There's so much of our body, so much of our life that is impacted by our hormones. It can feel a little overwhelming. So I'm going to give you my number one trick on what to track so that it makes it simple and easy for you. Before I do that, if you have felt like this video has been helpful at all, go ahead and just hit that like button. And if you want to learn more about how you use your cycle inside your life or your business, or how you really tap into that feminine energy, just go ahead and hit that follow button so that you can learn more. Now, my number one recommendation for learning how to track your cycle is to pick the things that are going to make the most impact for you. Maybe you're in business and you are looking at like, I need to be able to create, I need to be able to write the videos, I need to be able to write emails, things like that. Then when you look at what you're tracking, you're going to want to really pay attention to more of those mental things. How is your mentality showing up? How's your energy showing up for you? And start tracking that throughout the month on top of your period and ovulation dates. Like we want to know those two things. But then when we look at like throughout the month, like we want to look at those things that are the most important for that end goal that you have. If you are somebody who is wanting to cycle sync because you're looking at more fitness-based things and you're wanting to know how to match up your workouts, then for you, you're going to want to pay attention to like, what are my food cravings? Like, what am I leaning into? Like, how much my energy feel? Like, how easy was it for me to push my workouts? Maybe you're looking at your sleep and you want to help adjust and support your hormones and your cortisol level and your stress level overall. Then for you, you're going to want to pay attention to more of those sleep habits. So rather than taking all of these things and trying to track all of it at the same time, Give yourself the permission to track those things that are aligned with the goal that you have right now. And it can change down the road, but what is that goal that you have right now? So you can download my free cycle tracker. I will link that up here for you so that you can grab that. I highly recommend doing paper tracking to start because there's so much that you can see when you put cycle tracker, like these pages side by side by side, and you can see the trends that I feel like sometimes in the apps, we just fail to see. In the apps, they're going to be predictability based on those recommendations, right? Like what the cycle phases are supposed to be instead of what's really happening for you. And so instead of getting bogged down by like what other people are saying you should be feeling and what other people are saying you should be doing, I want you to really tap into like what is actually true and right and happening for you right now. And I think that the best way to do that is by having this paper tracker, something that you just track every single day. Maybe it's like a journal that you keep, and every single morning I have my cycle tracker journals that you can track every single day, and you journal out like what that morning looks like, what you're feeling, what you're wanting, what you're craving, all of those types of things. But can you have a routine in your day where you just write down quick little jots of like what you're feeling, what you're wanting, what you're creating, what those energy levels are that are in line with the goal that you have? When it's in line with the goals that you have, I think it makes such a massive difference than when we're just trying to track everything and we get overwhelmed and then we don't actually see any change or any benefit. So, recapping this video, be sure that you're tracking your period, be sure that you're tracking ovulation, and that you're tracking other things that are aligned with the goals that you have set throughout the month. If you want to know more, if you have any other questions about tracking, you want to know more, please leave a comment below. I would be happy to answer those in a further video. And I hope you have a fabulous day.